Can you all hear me and see the screen? Can someone respond in the chat? Okay, so you can hear me and see the screen. So we start. So today we are going to discuss two topics. That is arrays in Java. Then we will be moving to the control structures. Okay, so let's start with arrays. Arrays is a composite data structure. So last time we discussed about the primitive data, how to work with primitive data, and also we discussed the data types, the primitive data types like numeric types, Boolean, char. So those things we discuss. Today we are going to discuss composite data type structure in Java, which is arrays. Right. So when it comes to composite data, there are two things, that is arrays, right? Arrays. The other approach is called, you can have the collections when it comes to Java. Collections. So collection framework we will be discussing after doing object orientation. So today what we are going to do is the arrays, right? Arrays. Okay. So composite means basically you can keep in a single variable, you can keep more than one value of data at a time, right? So in primitive variable you can keep only one value at a time. In composite, right, data structure, in composite data structure you can keep more than one value at a time. So arrays and collections can be used. So we are going to discuss about the arrays. Okay, right, so let's move on. So in different languages, the way arrays are implemented is different, but there are a lot of similarities. So we are now talking only about the ways arrays are implemented in Java. But most of these concepts will be common to a lot of other languages as well, right? So first we are going to differentiate between collections and arrays, because those are the two approaches. So arrays keep the, you can in Java you can keep only same type of data in arrays, but collections there is a possibility of keeping different type of data in a single variable, right? And also in Java arrays are fixed size. That means once you create an array you have to declare what is the size, then that is the size, you can't add more than that. Okay, but in collections of any time you can keep on adding data, it's dynamic size. Okay, arrays are relatively faster than collections because arrays provide you less features, only the minimum features. Therefore, always arrays are faster than collections, and also memory wise, arrays use less memory than collections. Okay. Uh, but the only thing is arrays provide you only the basic features, no additional features. Collections provide you a lot of additional features as well, right? If you just need to store data and get data without much processing support from the data structure, you go for arrays because it's memory wise and performance wise better. But if you need more and more features, you can go to the collections. Okay. Right, so let's see how Java arrays work. Right, so what are the features of arrays in Java? Arrays are always objects. Right, in Java, arrays are objects. So still we haven't done object-oriented programming, that we are going to cover in the next session. But anyway, so just remember arrays are objects. So therefore, arrays have some properties. Arrays have some behaviors of methods, etc. Right, and also arrays can keep primitive types data as well as object type data. Remember, arrays itself is object, array itself is object, and also array can keep data of either primitive type like int, short, uh, float, boolean, and also it can keep objects. Right, if you have a count object or payment object, so you can keep those as well in arrays. Okay, so we will be discussing objects later. Uh, and also arrays are fixed size, right? So once you create array, the size is you can't change the size of the array. And also when we access an array, we use something called index, right? And that index is always zero base. And arrays can be one dimensional, two dimensional, or we can extend it to any dimension, like 3 dimension, 4 dimension. Okay, right. So first we are going to discuss about 1D arrays, then we will be moving to 2D arrays. Of course, you can extend that concept to any dimension, right? So let's look at how the one dimension arrays work. So we could think of an array as something like this, something like this. So this is how you visualize, so conceptualize an array. So this is where you keep data, right? So these are called elements, right? Elements. So there you keep the data, like if it is numbers 10, 20, 90, 70, etc. So these are called elements. And these individual elements, so this entire set of data is referred by one variable, say x, right? So in order to identify these individual elements, we need a concept called index. So this is your index. So using the index, we can identify what is this data. For example, if you want to refer to this data, it will be x square bracket 2, right? Because this is the index 2. And also this index is 0 base. So in Java, it always starts with 0. Anyway, it's a headache for programmers, but in all the languages, arrays are 0 base. The first element is called the 0th element. Okay, so that is how it works. So this is called the index. So these are individual elements, right? So that is the basic idea behind arrays. Okay. Right, so let's see how to declare an array. So when it comes to using arrays, you have to declare the array, create the array, then of course you can assign values, set values, and retrieve values. That's all, right? Because array is a data structure, right? It's like a bag, right? Container, right? So where you keep data, when you need, you access data, right? So that's it, right? So let's see how to declare an array, 1D array. So this is how you declare an array, right? So you have to give the data type, because arrays can keep data of only single type, right? So you can't keep in an array, you can't keep int data at the same time float data. No, arrays can keep only data of same type. If you want to keep multiple type of data, you have to go for collections, right? Which we will be discussing later in different session, right? So if you want to create an array, this is how you create an array. So I will just use the coding. I will be using the test Java file that we created last time. Right. So if you want to create an array, so just you have to have a data type for that array. So let's say int. Then you need the square brackets. Then you can say what is your array name. So this is how you declare an array, right? This is how you declare an array. If you need another array, like if you want to keep data of double, you can say double y. Right? So this is how you declare array. So this is called declaring array. Right? So I'm just using comments. Declare. Right? And then if you still you haven't created the array, this is like declaring variable. So if you want to create array, right? So now I have already declared array called x, which can keep only in data. Now I'm going to create that array x equal. Remember, arrays are objects in Java. Therefore, we have to use the new keyword. Again, you have to use the same data type. If it is an int array, you have to say int, and here you have to give the size of the array, because as I told you, arrays are of fixed size. You have to declare what is your size of the array. Then it can't go beyond that. So let's create array of size 4. Right, now I have created the array. Similarly, if I want to create the second array, I will say y equal new double, and you have to give the size. Right, so let's say the size is 3. Right, so that is how you create array. Right, so declare the array, create the array. If you want, you can do both these steps in single line, and also remember, whatever the data type here must be the data type here, right? Otherwise you will get a compile error. So if you want, you can combine these two steps. That means declare and create at the same time. So then what you have to do is, let's say int is set. So I am now creating that array in the same step, new int, let's say 3. So that is how you do combine these two steps together, right? So it's up to you, right? But you have to aware that these things are possible. Okay, right. uh, so now I can what are the two things we will be doing? Assign values to that array composite data structure, and later retrieve the value when we need it, right? So let's see how to set values. Then later we will see how to get values, and that's all, right? So arrays, concept of arrays is very simple, right? So we are not going to do anything else with arrays, right? So let's see how to set values. So I'm going to use the array x. Okay, array x. So as arrays are index, start with 0 and goes like 1 2 3. So I'm first going to set uh, the 0th element, and also okay, I'll discuss that later. So let's set a value x 0. So I can say x0 is 80. So this is how you set a value. If you have any questions, please raise. Okay, uh, because I am going to do it very fast. So if I want to say x2, I will say that is 40. So it is not necessarily that you have to go by the order, right? So I can skip one, right? I can set that value later, right? So that is how you set the value. Then how to access the value. So say I want to just print it, system.out.println. I can say please print the value in the 0th element of array x, right? So you can see declare, create. If you want, you can combine that, set the value, get the value. So that's it, right? So I save it. I'll take a command prompt. So I will move to D. My code folder is code and C. Still I am using that. Now I am using the test.java file. Test.java. So make sure you don't get compile errors, right? Once in a while, yes, but try to write a sort of a very perfect code. You can see my code is very neat, right? So right, I have properly indented it, right? I am adding some comments where necessary, right? And I also make sure that my code is run without or compile without any errors, because that is I am very I'm doing these things in a very careful manner, right? So have that attitude. Okay, right? So let's run it. Anyway, you will get some errors once in a while. So my class name is demo. So case sensitive class name we have to use. We discussed those things first session, right? So it prints 80, right? It prints 80. That is what I wanted to do, right? That is what I wanted to do, right? Right. So that is how you work with arrays, right? So you can declare, create, or you can combine. Then you can set values. or later you can get values. Because it's a variable, so the same thing you can set different values at different time also. For example, x0th element I can say now it is not 80, it is 70. Sorry, x0, the value is 70. Now if you print it, now it is not 70, now it will be printing as, because now the value is 70, it will print as 7. So whenever you change something you have to recompile, right? So the next time when when the execution comes here, it is 70, right? So in memory wise, what happens is it has not so it's something like this. We can look at it like this. It has allocated set of memory locations. This is not the address and data. This is just, so I will draw like this, because otherwise you will get confused. It has allocated set of memory locations, consecutive memory locations. For example, in X, the moment I create this array, so you can see it has to allocate 4 memory locations. Right? So basically, these 4 memory locations are referred to as X. Of course, the memory will be there, but these 4 consecutive memory locations are when we refer X in our program, it is referring to these 4 memory locations. And also when we say x0, it is this memory location 1, 2, 3, right? So in this line, when this line is executed, this memory location will be set 80, right? When this line is executed, this memory location will contain 40, right? uh, when this line is executed, now the x0 index has 80, therefore it will print 80, right? Now when this line is executed, it's again 0th index, now it is no longer 80, it will override this value of 80 in memory location, and it will store 70 here, right? Now it is no longer 80, it is 70, so that is why we call it memory, right? So when this line is executed, we asked to print the value in the 0th index, we refer as 0th index, so now it will print 70, right? So that is how it goes. Another thing is, when it comes to arrays, whenever you create an array, all it will assign default values to all these memory locations. For example, when I say create array of size 4, right? So at first what will happen is it will allocate, because it's an int array, the default value for int is 0. We discussed those things last time. Because the default value for int is 0, this will be 0, 0, 0 and 0 at the beginning, right? Then when this line is executed, it is no longer 0, it is 80. It is 80. When this line is executed, this is now 40. This is now 40. Right? So when we ask to print, it will print 40. Then when this line is executed, it is now 70. Right? So that is how it goes. Try to understand these things. That is why we discuss those things in the computer system subject. Now what happens if I ask to print something like this: system out println x1. Now we never assign a value to the first index, but remember, since the moment you create the array, right, when the moment you create the array, all those elements are initialized with the default value for the data type. In this case, for int, default value is 0. Therefore when you say print x1, it will print 1. It will print 1, right? So that is something you have to remember. Though we haven't assigned a value, still it has the value of 1. Okay. So again, I have to compile and run it. Right. So the value of 0 is there, right? Because the default value for sorry, this is not 1. The default value for 1 is because we haven't assigned, the value is 0. So yeah, because the default value is 0. Likewise, each and every element has at least the default value. The moment you create an array, for example, if you create a double array, all the elements will have 0.0. If you create a Boolean array, all the elements will have false. So we discussed those default values in the previous session. Okay. Other thing is, it's a fixed size. Now remember, we create an array of size 4. That means that's it. Only 0, 1, 2, 3. If you try to refer something like fourth element, index, fifth element, you are going to get an error. Right? So let's try to do that. So let's try to set a value for the fourth element. Say 70. Now remember, we create an array of size 4. That means 0 to 3. There is no index called 4. So what will happen is, you will not get any compile errors. Right? So let's try to compile. Right? So you can see there are no compile errors, but you are going to get a runtime error. Right? Runtime error. So that is something you have to remember. There are two type of errors: the compile time errors, runtime errors. If you refer to an index which is not existing, then what happens is, you won't get a compile error, or it won't be caught at compile time. It will be caught at runtime. So you have to remember that error's name also. That error is called array index out of bound exception, and it's not a compile time error, it's a runtime error. Okay, so the name is array index out of bound. So the index of the array that you refer to is out of the boundary, right? So that is what it says. Okay, so remember the exception name of the runtime exception also, right? And we will be discussing exception handling later. So there are two places where you may encounter errors: compile time, runtime. This is runtime error. Okay, right? So those are the things that you have to know. Right, so let's move on to our PDF. So, so I'm just going through the basics only. So you have to go through the note, right? Then, if you want, you have another syntax to create arrays, right? So remember, you can create arrays either using these two steps or these steps. But if you want to create an array with data quickly, there's another approach. Right? So that is, let's say, create arrays with data in the single step. So here you first create the array, then you assign values. Right? If you want to create the array and assign the value at the same time, there is a shortcut way. So let's create another array called something like, so I will make it A, B, this is A, this is B, this is C. Okay. A, right, right. So this will print 80, this will print 70, and 0. So this is going to give a runtime error. So this is, since it's going to give a runtime error, I'm going to comment this, otherwise I will always get compile errors there. Right, now it won't give any errors. Right, so let's create an array with data. So I'm going to use another name for that. We have C also. So let's create array D int. I forget to mention one thing. That is, when you create arrays, there are two ways. Or when you declare array, you can use. There are two approaches. That is, you can have the square brackets here, or you can have the square brackets. So rather than here, So I will use that approach in second one. You can have the square bracket somewhere here. So those both are valid, right? So either you can use the square brackets here, or you can have the square brackets here, right? So let's save it. Sorry, it's not afterwards, before, right? Sorry. So you can have the square bracket uh, here. So let's double check. Okay. No, afterwards. Why I'm getting error? I'm referring to X somewhere. So this should be A. It's a different error, right? So you can have the square bracket near your end of your data type or at the end of your variable name, right? So both are valid. Both are valid. So both are valid. Okay. So it's up to you which convention you prefer, but actually this convention is more elegant than this one. Okay. Because now your variable name is just there in the data type itself. You say this is a int array of weight. But if you want, you can use this also. Here also I could have the square brackets here. Okay, so those are the two approaches, but this is the most elegant approach. Okay, right. So I'm going to create array in the second other approach now. Let's say int. So I'm using the first approach. I will say C is also use D. Now I am going to have the data using curly brackets, say 40, 80, 90, etc. So this is a very convenient way of creating arrays if you already have the data, right? So you can just create the array and assign the values at the same time. So that is the third approach or the next approach. Then of course you can access these data because already you have set the data, something like the say this is zeroth element, this is first element, this is second element. I will refer to first element. It will print 80. It will print 80, right? So let's compile and run it, right? So it print 80, right? So that is another way of creating arrays, right? So, and again, if you at any time you can assign different values because it's array. So you can say the um, one is 50. Now if you print, now earlier the first position has 80, had 80, now it has 50. Now it will print 50. Okay, now it has 50, right? Right. So let's move on. Right. Later, if you want to refer to the size of the array, we have property called length. Remember, this is object, right? So therefore, we have property. If you want to check at the runtime what is the size of the array, you have the uh, length property, right? So let's print it. System out println. I want to check the size of D, so I can say D dot length. Right. So all the arrays have this implicit to this property because it's object. So in this case, it has to say the length is 3 because I create an array of size 3. Right. So let's compile and run it. right? It says 3, right? So those are small things. So as I told you, all the arrays, all the elements in an array will get the default values. Whole number types, it will be 0. Decimal types like float and double, 0.0. Boolean, a false value. Char, there will be a special character, you don't have to remember. For any other objects type, which we will be discussing once we do the object oriented programming, it will be null. Okay, it will be null. So, and also you will get the array index out of bound exception if you try to access a non-existing index. Okay, right. So I hope you don't have any questions, right? Right. Another small point I want to highlight is this is a very small topic, right? So very easy topic. Right. So if you want, you can have multiple arrays declared in the same line also. Right. So that is something I want to explain. That is, you can do something like this. Say, I will move to this. Declaring multiple arrays in same line. Still we are in single dimension arrays. For example, we can say int. Now we have a, b, c, d. I can say e comma f. So that means where's this, e comma f. So that means I have declared two arrays in the same line. Right, now e is array, f is array. Right, so I can create the array also later. E equal new int of, let's say, size 3. Right, so f also I can create new, so it has to be same type, right? Because we have already mentioned that it is int, let's say 4. Right, so likewise you can create multiple arrays in the same line also, just like we can write int x, y, z. You can write like this also. Okay, so it should compile. Right, so now I can set the value for individual elements and use it. Okay, individual elements and use it. So what about this? If you write this like this, say int efg comma, so efg comma h. So let's see whether we can compile that also. So that this is a tricky thing. Yes, you can do that also. What is the difference between this one and this one is, in this approach both e and f are arrays, int arrays, but in this approach the data type is int, g is an array, h is a primitive data. Right, g is an array, h is a primitive data. Right, so that is a something tricky thing that you have to remember. Actually I updated the document using this, because your original document was not referring to this particular scenario. I updated this. I will be uploading the array section again after the session, so it will have this particular session, because I forgot to add this to the your handbook. Okay, so here g is array. Now you can create an array g, new in something like 3, but remember h is not array. Right, h is not array. So I will just comment this. I will be able to compile this. Right, because g is array, I can create array, but h is not array. Right, early case, both e and f are arrays, but now h is not array. I will get a compile error here if I try to do this. Right. right? So because h is not array, h is a primitive value, right? So but if I can do something like this, because h is a primitive variable, so this is fine. This is fine. Now no compile errors, right? So remember, if you have this notation, here it's array, it's a primitive type, but if you have this, always all the variables are going to be arrays. Okay, so that is another important point you have to remember, right? Right, so we are done with the one-dimensional arrays, right? So if you have any questions, just put it into the WhatsApp group, or you can at any time you can raise, right? Uh, right. So now, if you don't have any questions, we are moving to the two-dimensional array. So these are very simple topics, right? So two-dimensional array means it's the extension of one-dimensional array where it's like a table, right? Table. If you want to have data in this kind of a tabular way, you can go for two-dimensional array, right? Two-dimensional array. Now you have two indexes or two indices. So the row index and the column index, right? Row index and the column index. So something like this. So the first index is the row index. Always indexes are 0 base. Again column also, first index is 0, 1, 2, 3. Now you can have data here like 70, 50, 30, 90, 10, 30. Of course, if you have not set to any value, it will be having 0, 100, 20. Now if you want to refer to a particular cell or element, now you have to refer, say this is my array, 2D array. Now if you want to refer to this, how to refer it is, you need to have x. First you have to go for the row, and then you have to go for the column. So 1, 2, 1, 2, right? So this is not like your mathematics. In mathematics we go for x and y, but this is something like y and x, right? Y and x, because it's tabular data we are keeping. In tabular data we always refer to the row and the column. So the first row, second column, right? So that is why in arrays we first refer to the row or something like y, then we refer to the something like x, because it's tabular data. First we refer to the row, then we refer to the column. So that is why they have changed it from xy to ix, right? Because it make more sense when it comes to tabular data. Okay, right? So that is what is known as a 2D array. The concepts are the same, right? Only thing is now you have to use two square brackets, a pair of square brackets, either near the data type or at the end of the variable name, right? Just like 1D. So first you have to declare, then you can create the array, or you can combine. Right? You can combine, right? So let's do a quick example for that. So all these examples, right, similar examples are available in our sites, Aurora CSLK bit. You can download the code, right? Right. So let's create a 2D array. Let's say int. So I need two square brackets. A equal. I'm going to create it single line. New int. Now you have to give both the dimensions. Right? So this is the number of rows. Let's say 3. And this is number of columns, let's say 2, right? So what I did is I create an array, 2D array like this, right? So yeah, it has 3 rows and 2 columns, right? 2 columns, right? 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, right? Now if I want to, so all these value will be having 0 initially, because always it will be initialized. Now if I want to set here some value, say some value here, I want to make it 100, then 0 1 0 1. So let's do that. A 0 1. So let's say the value is 100. Now it is having the value 100. Other locations it has the value of 0. System.out.println A01. Right. So it will print 100. But if you refer to some other valid index, it will say 0 because I am using int. Say 0 0, it will say 0. Let's compile it and run it. Right. So other location it says 0, but if you access a non-existing location, you know what is going to happen. For example, there is nothing called 03 because the number of fields columns are 2. Actually it's not 2 also because it's always 0 and 1. Now you will get a runtime error. If we are going to get the runtime index out of bound error, right? See, oh, why 0? I think I never saved this. Let's save it. How comes 0 1 0 1, 3 rows 0 1? Why we are not getting there? 0 1 2, this is 2 means 0 and 1. I am referring to 0 0 1 2. So it looks like I am not saving this. Let's save it here, file save. Still I am not getting it. So why is that? 0 1 0 0. So let's put something else for. So that is strange. Why is that happening? So in one dimensional I got the error, but in two dimensional I am not getting it. So let's try to print this. So yeah, I am trying to print it, right? So let's run it and see what is the output we are getting. Sorry, I forget, right? So this error is a runtime error, not a compile error. So I forget that. Okay, sorry. So because it's a runtime error, what you get is you get that error at the runtime only. Sorry, I forget that. Okay, so even you refer to 0 2, you will get the runtime error. So I just forget it. So it is not a compile time error, runtime error, right? So therefore you can compile it, but what happens is so now that error is because I just made that line, like I just made that line without commenting it, okay. So now I am not going to get any compile errors, but definitely I am going to get the runtime error. So therefore I am just going to comment this, right? Okay, right. So again you can have these square brackets here or after this value, right? For example, you can create array like this also. Say double v square bracket like this equal new double, say 2 1 2 3 or whatever, right? Right. So another thing we have to remember is if you refer to the length property, right? So now we have created an array. So let's refer to the system dot out dot println the length of a dot length, it will refer to the number of rows, not number of columns. Now remember, this is 3 rows 2 columns, right? 3 rows 2 columns, it will say 3, right? So it always refer to the rows, not the columns. Okay. So I will come in and run it. So it says 3, right? So if you want the columns, you just have to do something like this, system out println, say if I want to get the number of columns in your first row, you have to say a0 dot length. So that means what is the number of columns or what is the length of 0th row. In our case, for all the rows the length is 2, right? All the rows the length is 2, so it will say 2. So now it says 2. Likewise, you have to if you want number of columns, the length of the row, you have to use specific row and ask the length. Otherwise what it gives is the number of rows. Okay, right. So another point we want to highlight is, if you want to create odd shape arrays, right? Usually array is a square or rectangular, but you can create arrays of any odd shape, right? For example, if I need to create an array like this, something like this, where first one you have 3 elements, second row you have only 2 elements, and also again third row you have 3 elements, right? So if you want, you can do something like this, and of course another one is just 1 or 2, right? So what we, in that case, what we have to do is, so this is odd shape arrays. What this is how you do that. Let's create an array, a b c int c equal, now I'm creating the array in the same line, new int, for the first dimension you have to give, always you have to give number of rows. I will say 3 because I need 3 rows, but for the second dimension I am not going to give the value. So that is possible. Usually you have to give both the dimension if you want to create a square or rectangular, but if you want to create odd shape array, just keep this blank, right? So you are just saying that I need an array of 3 rows only, and now you have to say create the individual rows separately, right? So now what I am going to say is, I am going to say c0 zeroth row. Now I am going to say c0 is new int, because I need 3 columns there, I will say 3, right? So similarly, I need to create the c1 as having 2 fields, so this one is c1, 2 fields, 2 columns, c2 0 1 2, again I need 3, right? So that is how you create a odd shape array, right? Now if you want, you can set value like c, for example 0 0 1 2 0 2. Now again all these places will have zeros because it's int. 0 2 I can say 50, right? Of course I can print 0 2, right? So it will print 50. So let's see whether it works. So I'm going to compile this and run it. So it says 50, right? But there is nothing called 1 2, right? So remember, this is 0 1 2 0 1 2. So though we have 0 2, we don't have 1 2, because we just created, for the second row we created a size of 2, right? So let's see, is that the case? Let's try to set something like this. C1 2, there is no C1 2, right? So I'm going to set something like 70. Again, remember, this is not a compile time error. You will get the compilation without any issue, right? But you are going to have that runtime error now, right? Array index out of bound error, because what we created is odd shape array, right? Odd shape array. So you will get runtime error. Runtime error, right? So I'm covering everything, right? So I'm not keeping any gaps here, right? Again, if you refer to the length, it will say 2, because it's always refer to the number of rows, right? So if I say c dot length, it is going to say 3, because number of rows is 3. But if I refer to c0 dot length, c0 dot length, that means again it's going to say 3, because the 0th row has 3 fields. It's going to say 3 again. But if I refer to c1 dot length, now it's going to say 2, because we created it as size 2, right? It is going to say 2, right? So remember, so we created it with the size of 2, not 3, right? So let's see whether we are getting the result. So it should be 3 3 and 2. Yes, it's 3 3 and 2, right? So this is number of rows, this is number of columns in the first row, this is number of columns in the second row, right? Second row means 1, right? So I hope you are get the idea, right? So there are no questions, means you are getting everything. And again, the shortcut approach is available to create two-dimensional arrays also. Remember the use of curly braces or curly brackets, so that approach is available here, right? So let's create an array using that approach also. Let's call it d, let's say int d. So in that approach you don't have to specify the size, because size is extracted by looking at your number of data. Let's look at how I am going to create it, right? I am going to close this, right? So this is my first row, this is my second row. Come on. So likewise, I am first writing my rows, then I am writing the data, say 10 20 30. Even I can create odd shape arrays also. I am creating odd shape array, let's say 40 50. So I am creating array like this now, 50. If you want, you can just make it rectangular. I'll say 60 70 80, right? So now I can do all these things again. Only thing is now it is d. So when we say d dot length, it has to say there are 3 rows, 3. When we say d0 dot length, it has to say 3. d1 dot length, it has to say 2, right? Now if I want to refer to some data, say say I will say d1 1, it has to be 50. d1 1 is 50. So I will okay 3 3 2 50. 33250. Okay, so I forgot the semicolon. First I have to compile. Right, 33250. Right, so that is the last four outputs, 33250. Right, so likewise, again, if I try to refer to D12, I will get a runtime error. Right, I will get a runtime error. So I hope you got it. How to create use it 2D arrays as well. Right. Right, so everything is mentioned in the PDF. I will upload the updated PDF as well, because I forget to mention about that creating multiple arrays in single line in your PDF. I added that also in my Word document. I added, but I didn't get time to generate the PDF and upload. I will do that. Okay, right, so that's it for the arrays. So any questions? So any questions? No? So I don't know why you are very quiet, right? So I have two assumptions now. Either you are brilliant people or you are very shy people, right? So I assume the first one for the better. So you are brilliant people. Whenever something is explained, you get it in the first point, first step you get it, right? So I'm expecting a lot of A's, A pluses this time, right? So it's going to be a huge rain of A pluses this time because no questions, right? So that means you get it, right? So I'm very happy, right? I don't know whether I'm in a wrong assumptions. Based on my assumption, I'm very happy because no one is asking any questions. Okay, so if there are no questions, so let's not waste the time. So let's move on to the next topic, that is control structures, right? Semester 1. Basically, control structures is the heart of the structured programming, right? So once we do this and a little bit of methods, we'll move on to the object oriented next time. Okay, right. Right. So as I told you in the very first day, we can do programming in two different ways. So I'm keep on reminding this that because that is the most important thing, the big picture. So as I told you, there are two ways you can do coding: the structured way and the object oriented way. Right? Structured approach, object oriented. When it comes to structured, it's we think about the programming as data and process. Right, to process data, so data is processed. In object oriented, we think in terms of objects, right? Objects and related concepts like object, message, etc. Anyway, we will discuss in those things next class. So when it comes to data, it is variables and constant is a special type of variable. So we can subdivide data into a simple data and composite data. So simple data, it can be a primitive type data. So simple means primitive. So there we discuss the different data types like numeric types, int, byte, short, int, long, then uh, Boolean, char, right? So we discuss those things. Okay. In composite types, as I told you, there are two types in Java: arrays or collections. So we have covered all these things now. So this is covered. This is covered. This is covered. So only thing is we have to discuss the collections later, right? Collections framework later, then everything will be over. Now in this side, in process, I told you that there are three main concepts: the concept of operation, the concept of control structures, and the concept of methods, right? So we have covered this also, operations. So today we are going to cover the control structures, and if we have time, we will be covering the methods also. Then we are done with the structured programming, right? Then we are done with the structured programming. Then we can move to the object-oriented programming, right? So we can see, you can see that we are gradually finishing the subject, right? Right. So let's look at the control structures. right? So if someone asks what is mean by control structure, a control structure is a way of controlling the flow of the execution, right? So flow of execution can be controlled in different ways. Those different ways are called control structures, right? In programming, we find three main control structures: what is known as sequence, right? Sequence control structure, selection, right? Selection or condition, and the repetition or loops, or sometimes we call it repetition or loop or iteration. So those are the three control structures. Then we have another one which is not really a control structure, but we'll take that also, that is transfer. Right? So that is the big picture: sequence, selection, repetition, and transfer, right? So we are going to take one by one, starting with sequence, right? Starting with sequence. So sequence is the easiest control structure. So sequence, selection or condition, uh, repetition, iteration or loops. I'm giving you all these names because then you know that if some book or whatever is referring to something, you know that okay, they are referring to this particular concept, same concepts, right? All three terms, same concepts. And the transfer, so we can't say transfer control structure, we can say transfer statement, right? So here also it should be control structure. So these three are control structures, this is actually statement, okay? Right. So when it comes to control structure, so we have something called code blocks. If the control structure has single statement, you can just have the statement. But if the control structure has multiple statements, you need to have these curly braces or the curly brackets to block it. We'll be discussing that later. Right? So let's move on to the sequence control structure. Sequence control structure means the things will be happening sequentially, one by one. So actually we are already using this control structure. So when you write a code, right? So when you write a code, we know that first this line will be executed, next this line, this line, this line. So that is basically we are using the concept called sequence control structure. So we know that it is executed like this, right? So nothing else, nothing new to learn. We have been using this control structure, right? It execute like that, right? So that is called the sequence control structure, right? So nothing new to learn, right? So let's move on therefore to the next control structure, right? So this is an example given, right? So we discussed this how to get input from the user, right? So you need to have the scanner import, then you have to create the scan object, then you can use this next int, next line, next byte, etc. to feed different type of data, okay? And also we discussed the printf statement also. Now we can see this is a sequence of actions happening, right? So it asks you to enter the first integer, second integer, then it does the summation and give you the output, okay? So that is basically a sequence, right? So this will not be formatted, it will be a very ugly code, okay? And just copy and paste it to the main method. So I have to import the scan. So make sure that you code, so don't look at the, you can't use a book and just read it and learn programming. You have to do programming, right? So that is why we have uploaded the code. And also make sure that you do something very nice, right? You can see always my code is neat. So you can see under public p I have this. So always use tabs, don't use space. So those who are using the space is going to miss things. Right. So I'm using the demo Java C and the test.java because my file name is test. And now I'm going to run it. Right. So if you say in the first integer, let's say 60. In the second integer, I will say 50. Now it has to say 100. Right. So this is a very small program, right? So it uses the sequence, right? So it execute like this. Right? So make sure that you write this kind of code, right? Then only it's going to be very interesting, right? So solve some simple, start solving some simple problems. Then later you can solve serious problems, right? So then you will be very happy that okay, I solved this particular business problem. I came up with a small program system, right? Okay. So now let's move into the second control structure, that is called selection control structure. Since this is a quick revision, I am not going into the bit and piece of everything. I am just giving you the big picture, right? So you have to think through the book, okay? Right. So when it comes to selection, there are two type of selections. What is known as Boolean selection and value selection, right? So we discuss all these things in the first topic, where we discuss the programming concepts. You have this value selection where the selection or the condition is based on a value, right? But when it comes to a condition is based on a boolean logic like true or false, we call it boolean selection, right? So in Java, for the boolean selection we have the if statement. For the value selection we have the switch statement, right? So you have to understand these things. Don't just memorize okay there are two things because they are having two things, let's learn those two things. No, first you have to understand why there are two things. Why there are two things? Because there are two type of selections: boolean selection, selections based on true false, value selections or value condition, the selection based on a value, right? So we discuss those things, right? For example, if I click file menu has to be presented. If it is edit menu. If it is view menu. Window menu. So that is value selection, right? But when I say save, it will ask yes or no, right? Then it's a boolean selection, true or false, right? So at that point it is boolean, but when I select a menu, it is value. Okay, right? So for the boolean selection, Java provide control structure called if. For the value selection, it provides control structure called switch, right? So this if control structure, we can use it in three ways: the if alone, if with else, if with any number of else if, and of course optionally else, right? Right. So let's discuss that first. Then of course for the Boolean condition we have operator also, that is called the ternary operator. So that also we are going to discuss, right? Ternary operator. Actually it is not a control structure, it's operator. Since it's related to the Boolean condition, we are going to discuss that also, right? Right. So this is how the if condition or the if Boolean condition conditional structure works, right? It will check the condition. If the condition is true, it will do something. Otherwise, if it is false, it will not do anything, right? It will not do anything, right? So I will take all three together. When it comes to if else, if the condition is true, it will do something. If false, it will do something else. In previous case, if false, nothing was done. But in this case, if false, we are going to do something else. Okay, so that is how it works. So this is the syntax for if condition. So if Boolean expression, so this must be some expression that evaluate giving you a true or false value, and this is your body, right? So I have given a simple example, right? So let's create that example. So I have imported the scan class. So let's start with, say I'm asking the user to enter a data. So let's call it marks. Write some practical sort of examples. I will say enter marks. Enter marks. So I will assume that he is only entering the integer values. Otherwise I have to say next double or something. I assume that the person is entering on the integers. I'm not doing any validation, so whatever. Now I can say, so now it is not a, it is marks. Now I can use a, now so far it is sequence, right? So it executes this one, this one, this one, this one. Now I'm going to introduce conditional control structure. If you can see that first I am creating the control structure, then I am coding, right? Then I am coding. So that is how the professional programmers do. So my condition is, I will say if marks greater than 50, right? So then I will say system dot out dot println, I will say good. So very simple program. So then finally I will say println by. So this is a very simple program. So if the marks entered is greater than 50, I will say good. Then anyway I am going to say by in any scenario. If the marks is not greater than 50, I will not say good, I will just say by, right? So because this is not part of the control structure. Okay, so let's run it. Right, so I'm running. So it say ask you to enter marks, I will say 60. It will say good and by. Right, now I'm going to run it again because it comes to this if condition, and once if condition is over, it comes to the it continue with the sequence. Okay, now again I am running it. I will say 40. Now it will not go into the if condition, it just say by. So now you can see it is following this path, right? So it previously it was following this path, and the second run time it was following this path, right? Because nothing was there in theirs, it just skipped the if condition. Okay, right? So likewise, don't take a book and read, right? So that is, you are a very crazy person. හරි ටිකක් හරි ගියාම අංගොඩ තමයි නවතින්නේ. ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑමින් පොතක් අරන් ගිහලා කියෝ හිටියොත් එහෙම හරි ඔය ඇත්තටම අංගොඩ තමයි නවතින්නේ. ඉගෙන ගන්න ගිහිල්ලා අන්තිමට පිස්සෙක් වෙනවා. But if you take a notepad or an IDE and start coding, yes, you are going to be a smart person, right? Otherwise you are going to be a some nut case, right? අන්තිමට BIT එකක් හරි මොනවා හරි ඉගෙන ගන්න ඇවිල්ලා අන්තිමට පිස්සෙක් තමයි ඉතුරු වෙන්නේ මේ කෝඩ් කියෝ ඉඳලා. හරි? කෝඩ් කියවන්න එපා, ඊට වැඩි ලස්සන සින්දු කවියක් හරි මොනවා හරි නවකතාවක් කියවන්න ඒ වෙලාවේ. අන්තිමට අතිකාරයක් වෙනවා. හරි? Right. So let's move on to the if else. Now another thing what I want to tell is, now this is a code block, right? So I always use code block, right? Because that is good practice, right? But syntactically, if you have only one line in your block, having this curly bracket is optional, right? But for me, always use the code block. But in the exam, they will check whether you are aware of these concepts. Therefore, even if it is not there, it is going to work, right? So I'm just indenting for you to understand. Still, the logic is the same. Still it will execute the same way, right? It will execute the same way. So I will compile and run it again, right? So if I enter 60, it will say good and by. If I enter 40, it will just say by. Now you can see, though the curly brackets are not there, it knows that when there is if statement, this line belongs to the, even if you can write it like that also, this line belongs to the if. But this line is not belong to the if, right? Because if there are no curly brackets, it assumes that only the following line is part of the control structure, right? So that is why when I say 40, it did not execute good this line, but it execute this one because it knows that since there are no curly brackets, it knows that only the following line is part of the control structure. So that is why when I type 40, it just say by. Okay, but if I want to do two things, so if say I want to say something like this, So I will say good student. Now I am in trouble. So I want to say good student when it is greater than 50, right? So but I am not using curly brackets. Now what will happen is, so my intention is this: when it is greater than 50, say good student and by, otherwise just say by. Now let's see what happens. So I will enter something more than 60. Yes, that is fine. It says good student by, but what the issue is, if I say 40, still it will say student by, right? So because the student part, this line is not part of the if condition. In this kind of a situation, it's a must to have these curly brackets. Then only it knows that okay, these two lines belong to the if condition, right? But the best practice is, for readability, even when you have just single line, make sure you write the curly bracket also. Right. Another thing is there are two conventions, right? So you can see that when I am writing if condition, I am writing the curly bracket here, right? I am writing the curly bracket here. So that is the Java convention. That is the Java convention. Write the curly bracket in the same line as the control structure. But there is another convention, that is you have the curly bracket somewhere here, right? Somewhere on normally in Vidhi. So that is basically the old fashioned C++, so C fashion of curly brackets. So Java programmers use this. So this is very elegant because your code number of lines are getting less also. At වෙනද මෙහෙම ලියුවම code එක දිග වැඩි වෙනවා. හරි. මෙහෙම ලියුවම code එක දිගත් අඩු වෙනවා. මේක තමයි Java programmers ලා use කරන විදිය. But unfortunately in your PDF, in your VLE, sometimes it use the old fashion, right? So let's not use the old fashion, let's use the modern fashion of compact fashion, right? So I'm using the modern fashion or the modern Java convention, right? Right. So that is how the if condition works. Now if I want to introduce something for the else part, now I can use the else, and I'm always using the curly brackets, right? But it's optional. I will say right. So I won't say bad, try hard, right? So now I can say something to the else part also. Now I can compile and run. Now if I enter something like 60, same thing will happen. But if I enter something like 30, it will say try hard, because now we have the else part also, right? Right. So I hope you get it, right? And also remember that if you have if and else together, so these are the tricky places. I told you that always having curly bracket is important things, but here the curly bracket is optional, yes, but here the curly bracket is not optional. Now you are going to get a compile error, because in between if and else you can't have more than one line unless you have the curly brackets, right? So those are the tricky places where those things will be tested in your exam also, whether you are aware of these things, right? So now you are going to get compiled, right? Right. So if you have multiple lines, you must use curly brackets, right? So you must use curly brackets, otherwise you are going to get compiled error, especially here. Otherwise, if you have multiple lines, you won't get compile error, but anyway the semantic is wrong, right? But for if part, uh, you are going to compile error also, right? Right. So that is if and else. Now we are moving to the next control structure. Sorry, the variation of the if else, that is if else if, right? If else if. So we can have multiple conditions also. Remember the previous flowchart. If true, do this, else do this. In if else if, what happens is, if true, do this, if false, then check this condition, and if it is true, do these things, or else, that means that the condition is false, check the next condition likewise. So that is where the else if comes, right? If none of these conditions are satisfied, of course you can go to the else part, there is no else part, if none of those conditions are satisfied, it won't do anything, right, within that control structure, right. So we can now change the same program to use something like a if else if statement, right. So again, still we are taking the marks, right. So likewise, you write a code and keep coding, right. So very important, keep coding, then you will be a software developer. Keep reading, then you will be a nutcase, right, nutcase, right. So I'm warning you, right. So let's say I'm going to give a grading system rather than so I'm going to have another variable, let's say char variable, let's say grading, right. So we'll say if it is greater than, let's say greater than or equal 80, we will assign the value of, we will assign the value for grading as a. Remember, this is char, we have to use, we discussed those things last time, single quotes, right. Now I will say else if the marks is greater than, say, 670, right. Now if it is already greater than 80, it will go there. Now why it comes here? Because it's not greater than 80. I just have to check whether it's greater than 70, because anyway it is not going to be greater than 80 now. So I will say grading is, you can see that just you have to do copy paste. I will say B. Now I'm going to copy paste again. If it is greater than 50, I will say C. That means between 50 and 70, right. I will just say else I will say your grading is F. Grading is F, right. So finally I'm going to print it. I could have print here also, but the nice thing is you better print somewhere later, then your code is very professional, right, very neat, right. So this is how you use if else if state. You can have any number of else. Now you can see there's a syntax error here, right. So I hope there are no any other errors, right. So let's compile and see. Anyway, if I get error, I will just fix it. Java C test, no error, so I'm going to run it. So if I enter something like 65, what is going to happen? It won't go there, it won't go there, it will come here. So its grading will be C, then it will be printed as C, right? It will be printed as C, right? So if I run with something like 30, it will print something like F, right? So that is how you use the if else if statement, right? If else if statement in a program, right. So it's Boolean because true false, but true false we are using multiple times, right. True false, true yes, false go there, true yes come here, or false go to the next time, right. If nothing is true, do this, right? Yes, right. So that is how you work with the. So now we are done with uh, Boolean condition. Now we are done with Boolean condition or the Boolean selection. Now we are moving to the value selection, right? So second conditional statement. So this Boolean condition, so let's do that also, because we didn't do that in the operator section. uh, because this if else is a very commonly used control structure. If you just want to assign a value, you don't want to do anything like multiple statements or any processing, you have a short cut sort of a thing, right. uh, so that is called a ternary operator, one of the ternary operator. Ternary means it needs three operands, the ternary conditional operator. So something like this, something like this. You have always you have to assign a value, then you have the Boolean condition, the question mark, this is what the value to be assigned if it is true, then the colon, what value to be assigned if it is false, right. So let's do a very simple example for that one also. So I'm going back to the original example. let's say, so I'm not using the grading. So let's say string, I'm using string type also. Let's say your result, your result. So again I'm asking to enter marks, right? Enter marks. So now I could have written this like this also, that is something like this. If marks is greater than 50, my result is now, because I'm using a string, I can have double quotes and have set of characters. I will say pass, otherwise I will say fail, fail. Right. So there, now I am going to print it, result. Right. So let's see whether it's working. I hope there are no compile errors. I always double check are there any compile errors, because I don't like getting compile errors. I get upset when I see compile errors, right? So some people enjoy seeing compile errors and they play with the compile errors. Don't play with your compile errors. Play with your business logic, okay? So some people are මඩනානා වගේ සමහර ආසයි මඩනනා ඉන්න. ඒගොල්ලෝ තමයි මොකද කරන්නේ? errors නනා ඉන්නවා ඒගොල්ලෝ. ඒගොල්ලෝ පොඩ්ඩක් කෝඩ් එක දිහා බලන්නේ නැහැ. හරි, ඒගොල්ලෝගේ ජීවිතය තමයි මඩනාන එක, ප්‍රශ්නත් එක්ක පොරබදින එක. හරි, මොකද පොඩ්ඩක් මේක දිහා සීරියස්ලි බලන්නේ නැහැ. right, ඉඳලා හිටලා ප්‍රශ්නයක් ආවට කමක් නැහැ. ජීවිතේ ප්‍රශ්න ගොඩක් කරගන්න එපා. හරි, right. So let's see. Java C test. Yes, no errors. So I'm going to run it. I will say 70, so it will say pass, right? If I run 40, it will say fail. Right, now I'm going to use that conditional operator rather than this. If you are doing something like this, very simple thing, just assign a value, nothing else, right? So just if you are doing only one thing, that is assigning a value in both if and else part. So, right, in that very special case only you can use the conditional operator. So I'm going to comment this. So I can just block comment rather than deleting. So this is how to do the block comment. Star slash star. Right. So this won't be executed. Now I'm going to use the operator, conditional operator. So I have the variable result. Right. So I will say result equal. Now I have the condition. So the condition is marks greater than 50. The brackets are not must, but I always use the bracket for readability. So if you want, you can just forget about it. Then the question mark, right? Then if it is true, what is to be assigned to the result? Yes, I want to assign pass. Then colon, if it is false, what is to be assigned? I will say fail. Right, that's it. Right? So that is rather than writing this, you can have this conditional operator, but this can be done only if you are doing just one thing. That one thing is assigning a value, and both the cases you are assigning the value to the same variable. Then only you can do this. You can use this conditional operator. Right, now let's run it. I will get the same result. Okay, so I have to compile it because I did a code change. If I enter something like 60, it will say pass. If I enter something like 10, 20, I will say I will get fail. Right, so same thing. So you can see same thing, specific thing, that is you are only assigning a value and you are assigning the value to the same variable. Yes, you can go for the conditional operator. Otherwise you have to use the control structure, right, if you are doing some complicated things. Okay, right. So we are done with Boolean operator. Right, we are done with Boolean operator. So if you have any questions, just at least put it send it to the WhatsApp group so that I can discuss right now, right? සමහර මිනිස්සු ඉන්නවා ඔහේ තේරෙන්නේ නැහැ ඔහේ ඉන්නවා ඊට පස්සේ තැන් වල ගිහිල්ලා කියනවා අනේ මන් දන්නේ නැහැ මෙලෝඩියක් මට තේරුනේ නැහැ කියලා නැත්නම් නේද කටවල් තියනවා නම් දැන් කතා කරන්න හරි එතනින් තේරුම් ගන්න තමයි okay right so now we are moving to the value selection right value selection for the value selection we use something called switch statement right switch statement or the sometimes we call it the case statement also again just like the Boolean if condition can be used in three ways only if it else if a switch can be used in two ways also that is switch with break or the simple switch and switch without break so basically switch with break switch without break so the two approaches are switch with break switch without break right first we will discuss switch with break then we will discuss switch without break okay so this is the syntax right? So 1 minute this is the syntax when you are using the switch with break so you have the switch statement switch keyword there you have to have the selector it is a variable it is not a expression that evaluate true or false it will be a variable right then you have individual case statement and at the end of each case set of case statements you will have the break statement so that is why we say switch with break and of course you can have the default statement as well right then there's small mistake there will be a curly bracket to end the switch control block okay so that is how it happens so this values selector must be a variable of discrete type discrete type එකෙන් කැඩි කැඩි යන type එකක් වෙන්න ඕන. ඔයාලට එතනට ගන්න පුළුවන් data types ටික තමයි මොනවාද ගන්න පුළුවන් data types in Java any whole number type like byte short int char and we will be discussing the corresponding wrapper types later that is character byte short integer and also you can use enumeration type that we will be discussing after learning the object orientation so only these types are possible right byte short int char character type byte sorry then there are wrapper classes or the enum right enum so those things can be used to work with remember that you can't use stuff like float or double cannot be used right because float and double are continuous types ඒවට අපි කියන real numbers කියලා කැඩි කැඩි නෙමෙයි යන්නේ ඒවා නිකන් flow වෙලා යන numbers ඒවයි precision issues එහෙම තියෙනවා හරි ඒක හන්ද ඒවා use කරන්න බෑ right and also you can't use Boolean right because this is a value selection discrete value types like even char is okay because char we have the a b c d specific things okay right right so let's create a let's do an example so I'm always using this scan object to make it a little bit interesting right so I'm not using so I'm using the same example mentioned in your notebook your handbook or handbook so let's say this is day this is date or what so let's say this is date and this is day right? So I'm asking you to enter the date so you have to enter the date as 0 1 2 or whatever 0 to 7 so sorry 1 to 7 first date second date date of the week so I'm going to say which date is that it's very simple thing just to demonstrate this right so then I will read it as date I just wonder whether date is a keyword in Java I hope it is not a keyword if it is a keyword I will get a compile error okay so finally I will say bye right So let's compile and see whether I just want to check whether this date is a keyword in Java, because you know that keywords can't be used for no issue, right? So now I'm going to use the switch, right? Value selection. So based on your value is 1, I am going to do one thing. If the value is 2, I am going to do another thing. Likewise, I am going to write the, right? So let's say switch. So I am always coding like this. Hari. මේ session එකකට ඇවිල්ලා ඉගෙන ගන්න මෙන්න මේ කෝඩ් කරන විදිය. හරි. පොතක ඔයාට උගන්වන්න බෑ මේ කෝඩ් කරන්න. ඔයා නැත්තම් කෝඩ් කරන උඩ ඉඳ ගන්න. Right? So then I have to have that variable which must be a discrete variable. Yes, this is a int variable, so I can use it date. Right? Then I can have the any number of case statements. Case like this. So let's say case 1, I am going to do this, right? And at the end you need to have the break statement also, right? So you can have any number of statements followed by a break statement. So I will just write the break statement here only, right? So what I am going to do is so I will say I have the day variable. I will say day equal Monday. So you can do anything. Now you can see if the date is the value is 1, that what you entered is 1, it will come to this case statement. I am assigning to this variable Monday, and I am breaking out of the control structure. Now I can just copy paste. So coding is not difficult because you can do a lot of copy paste. I need 7 statements. 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 7, yes, 2 3 4 5 6 7, right? So I will say here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? So if I need, I can have the default statement also, default, right? And say if you want to do something, you can do that also. I will say days, I will say just invalid, because it's a string. I can have any number of characters. Invalid day, right? So in the final line also, if you want, you can have the break, because anyway it is the last line, it is optional. I will not keep the break, right? So here, for the readability, I will just space it, because I want to write a neat code also. If you want here also, if you want, you can just have a space, but remember white spaces are for our readability. Compiler will ignore these white spaces, right? So that is how you do it, right? So then I will be printing the day rather than by. I will print it the day, right? So I will compile it. Now if it is my value is 3, it will come to switch, and it is 3. It won't go to 1 or 2, it will come to the 3. Now the variable day will be assigned with Wednesday, because it says break. It will break out of the this control structure. That means it comes here. By the time my day variable has a Wednesday, therefore it will be printing Wednesday. Now let's see, right? So I just save it, Control S, compile, and I'm running it. Let's say 3, and it's say Wednesday, right? So let's run it again. So let's say 6, it has to say Saturday, right? And of course if I run it with something like 9, it won't go, it will not go into any of the, it will not be going to any of the case statements. Therefore it will go to the default statement, therefore it will say invalidate, right? So that is how the, now you can see it's a value condition, right? It's not true false, it will look at the value and send you to the correct case, right? Send you to the correct case, right? And if none of the cases are satisfied, it will go to the default case, right? So it's very simple, right? If you want to do multiple things, you can have any number of statements here also. For example, so here if I want to say in only 7, I can have another statement here, another thing, as so you have to keep on have this semicolons. For example, I can have system or println, system dot out println, and say something. So likewise you can have any number of things. So I just say hello, right? Just to demonstrate, right? So likewise you can have any number of statements, then another semicolon, another semicolon. So of course you can have it in the next line also. So, right? Usually most of the time we'll be doing just one thing, so then I have to compile it again and run it. So I will be entering 6 because I just want to take you to that particular case. It says, so why not Saturday? Sorry, it was for 7, right? Sunday, right? Saturday we don't have anything else, so I will run it with 7. It will say hello and Sunday, right? So this is actually very strange place where you can have multiple statements without the curly brackets, right? Multiple statements. So this is a one statement, this is another statement. Usually you saw that in if else statements, etc. If you have multiple statements, you need to have curly brackets, but this is a rare situation. They have allowed you to use multiple statements without curly bracket. If you want, I think you can have the curly brackets like this, right? So let's see, but that is optional, right? Yes, if you want, you can have it, but this is a very rare occasion where use of curly bracket is optional. Actually the software developers, because that is optional, they never use it, right? Because in switch statements we usually don't use the curly brackets because that control structure is most of the time self-explanatory, okay, right? So there is a, but usually we don't do multiple things, right? Most of the time we will be doing just one thing, but if you want to do multiple things, that is also possible, okay, right? So that is how the case statement work. But you can't have something like uh, here it has to be a byte, short, int, char, that kind of things you can't have. For example, you can't have this double or float, right? Right? Float or whatever, then of course it has to be next float, right? Now we are in trouble, right? Now here you are going to get an error saying you can't have float variable in the switch because that is not a discrete type, so let's try to compile it. Right, you can see the error is there. So the switch has the error because double and float, there are some precision issues. They are not working with precise values, right? So that is why it says there's a loss of possible lossy conversion, therefore it can't figure it out. So only data types like byte, short, int, long, and char can be used for switches, okay, right? So I'm going to change it back to int. Here also I'm going to make it int, okay. So we will be moving to IDE next time, right? So I just want to keep you more and more in the notepad and command prompt. Actually the UCSC recommend you to stay with the notepad for the entire semester 1, right? Then move on to the other IDEs later, but anyway we'll be moving to the IDE next time when we are doing object orientation, right? So that is switch with break, right? right? Switch with break. So this, it's very important to understand this flow chart. නිකන් ඊළඟට මේ flow chart එක ඇඳලා අඳින්න බලන්න. value condition එක තියෙනවා. අදාළ block එකට යනවා. ඊට පස්සේ block වලින් එළියට යනවා. කොයි block එකට ගියත් එයා block එකෙන් එළියට යන්න ඕන. මොකද break statement තියෙනවා. හරි. එකකටවත් ගියේ නැත්නම් එයා මේ default කියන block එකට යන්න ඕන. හරි. අන්තිම block එකට. Right, now we are going to discuss about the second approach, use of switch without break. Without break. Now we use with break. Now I will demonstrate. I will remove all these breaks. I will remove all these breaks. Now let's see what will happen. So that is now switch without break. Switch without break. So it will behave in a very funny way now, right? Very funny, very strange way. So I compile it and run it. Now if I enter something like 3, what will happen is, now let's look at the output. Oh, why it's saying invalid date? Still there are some places. Date, int, extent. All right, so why it's happening is because I will change this little bit to explain this. I will have something like this. I will print this here itself just to demonstrate, okay? Otherwise you will not understand what I'm talking. So I'm printing it here itself to better demonstrate it. Right, so I will just say sun. Type kan family denga. Sun. Right, so let's say 1. Friday, Saturday and Sunday, right? So now there are no break statements. No break statement. Now what will happen is, if my number is 3, say 3, if I have entered 3, it won't come to 1, it won't come to 2, but it is now going to come to the 3 because the value is 3. Now it says system or println use, so it will print TUE. Now since there are no break statement, or there is no break statement here, what will happen is it will go to the next one, next one, next one, next one, and it will even go to the default. So that behavior is called fall through behavior. If there is no break statement, what will happen? It will come to the correct case, then it will go into the each and every following cases. So that is how the control structure works, right? If you have a break statement, it will come to the correct case, and since there is a break statement, it will break out of the control structure. Right now we don't have break statement. Therefore, if I enter 4, it will say wed, the, fry, sat, sun. Of course, it won't say sun 1 2, but correct one, then all the subsequent one, including the default. So that is how the switch without break occur. Now let's see. Compile, run. So let's say 4, that means Wednesday one. It will say wed, thu, fry, sat, sun. Why? It has that fall through behavior. So that is, you will see that is a crazy thing to do, right? So why, when I say 4, why do you want to say Thursday, Friday? I just want to say Wednesday. Yes, that is why we are having the break. But this can be used for our advantage to build certain logic. So that is why they have allowed use the switch statement without the break also. So this is what I am going to do. I don't need the exact date. I just need whether it's a weekday or weekend. So in that case, what I do is, look at what I am going to do. I am going to delete all these things to get that functionality. I will say here weekday. I will delete this. Sorry, not this one. Up to 5 is the weekday. Uh, then I will delete this, and here I will say weekend. Right. Here of course I have to say invalid date. Right. So again, when we say without break, we have to use break certain places at the end of the block. So here we are going to use break. Here also we are going to use the break. So when we say without break, it doesn't mean that we are not using break at all, but in these places we are not using break statement, right? So now what happens is, if it is 1 or 2 or whatever, for example, if I enter 2 here, it will come to this case 2. We have not asked anything to do there, but because it has come to the correct one, now it is going to fall through. It will come to the third one, nothing to do. Fourth one, nothing to do. Fifth one, now it says print weekday and break. Since we are saying it break, it will go out of this. Now you can see, if it is 1, 2, 3 or 5, it will say weekday. If it is 6 or 7, it will say weekend. If none of these, it will go to the default and say invalid, right? So that we are using the fall through behavior for our advantage, right? So let's compile it and run it. So I hope I saved it. Right, so let's say 2. Okay, so 2 is not recognized. Why? There must be some issue. Date. So where is there? Can someone figure it out? Int date. Okay, so I have to run it. So sorry, without running I just print 2. So I have to run it first. Java demo. Right, now I have to enter 2. Now when I enter 2, it will go to this, nothing to do. It will go to this. Now it goes to this, and it is a weekday. Anyway, we have a break statement, therefore it will break out, right? So it says weekday. So if I again run it using something like 6, it will say weekend. If I again run it something like 0, it will say invalid. Now we can see we use that fall through behavior, which is sort of a very crazy behavior, right? It looks like a very useless behavior, but we can use that behavior for our advantage to build some interesting logic, right? So that is why they have retained that feature, right? If you have to do some common thing, what you can do is have all these case statements and have that common functionality at the last one on that range, and of course you have the break. Then another set of common things, have the statement and break likewise. You can do something like this, but only if it is related to a range of values, right? So very rarely we use it, but there are some usages, right? That is why they have retained that. That is why this break is not by default. If it is break, you have to write the break, otherwise the fall through will occur. Okay, right. So I hope you got it. Since I am not getting any questions, I always assume that perfectly understood, right? Okay. So this is the control structure. My control structure adinna. So if you come to the correct statement, then it will go to the subsequent statement. So I have drawn this assuming that there are no break at all, but reality is there may be some break somewhere here. It will fall through like this and it will break out. Right? There will be another set of things, another break, another set of things, another break, depending on your business logic. Okay. Okay. So right now we are done with. Now remember we discussed two type of conditions or selections. The Boolean selection, under that we discuss if if else and if else if, and of course the ternary operator, conditional operator. Then under value selection we discuss the switch. Switch can be used with break and also without break. Now we are moving to the repetition or the loops or the iteration, right? So whatever the name, it's the same thing. Repetition. While in Java we have three loops: the while loop, do while loop, for loop, right? So there are three loops. The while loop is the basic loop. Do while is a special case of a while loop. For loop is just a short form of writing while loop, right? So that is how you understand it. So let's take the main loop, the while loop. That is the one that we most of the time use, right? So again it's a repetition. So if you check the condition at the beginning of the loop, if the condition is true, it will allow you to execute the loop body. At the end of the loop body, it has to come back to the condition and check again. As long as the condition is true, it will keep happening or keep iterating. The moment the loop condition become false, it has to get out of the loop, right? So that is how it works, right? So this is the syntax. Here it has to be a Boolean condition. That means what? It can be any variable or expression, but it has to evaluate and give a result of a true or false, right? So that is how it works. It's something like if else, right? But the thing is, this is keep on happening, right? So let's do a very simple example, right? I'm keeping this scanner just to make uh, some interesting examples, right? Say I'm asking you to enter a number, any number. So I assume that you are entering a whole number. Enter a whole number. Enter a positive whole number. So I am not doing any validation. Positive whole number. Purna sankhyaවක් enter කරන්න කියලා. Now what I am going to do is I am going to print from 1 to that number, right? From 1 to the number you enter. For example, if you have entered 10, I will print 1 to 10. If you have entered 5, I will print 1 to 5. So let's see how to do that, right? So now you have to start thinking uh, in terms of control structures. So in the very first day I explained you that programming is giving set of instructions to the computer, right? Programming is solving a problem, right? But so that the steps of that solving the problem, you have to give it to the computer, present to the computer in a very precise way, very structured way, because computer is a dumb device, right? Computer is a dumb device. Computer කියන්නේ මෝඩ device එකක්. මෝඩ device එකක් නම් එයාට කියන දේ විතරයි එයා කරන්නේ. එයාට හිතලා තේරුම් ගන්න බෑ. ඉතින් අපි කියන්නේ අපි තමයි intelligent වෙන්න ඕන. අපි තමයි smart වෙන්න ඕන. So we have to මේ මෝඩයට, මේ මෝඩ පුතාට බොහොම precise විදියට කියන්න ඕන. මොකද මිනිහා ඒ කියපු ටික විතරක් දන්නවා. يعني ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා ඇති මෝඩියෝ පාලනය කරන්න ලේසි කියලා ඔයගොල්ලෝ දන්නවා ඇති. හරි. මොකද මෝඩයා හිතන්නේ නැහැ. මෝඩයා කියන දේ විශ්වාස කරනවා. කම්පියුටර් එක කියන්නේ මෝඩයෙක් කියන දේ විශ්වාස කරන, කියන දේ ඒ විදියට කරන වහලෙක්. අපි ඒ වහලගෙන් තමයි වැඩ ගන්න හදන්නේ. අපි ස්මාර්ට් වෙන්න ඕන. මොකද වහලෙක් වහලට ඌට ඔළුවෙන් හිට ගන්නකොත් ඔළුවෙන් හිට ගන්නවා. ඒකත් අපි දැනගන්න ඕනේ මේක හරියට කියන්නේ. හරි. ඒකයි අපේ වැඩේ. එකක් so other thing is computer has only limited capabilities. We have to think in terms of these limited capabilities, limited control structures, and present the logic. So that is why in the very first day I told you that programming is think in a narrow way, right? So we have to go into the mindset of the computer, the limited capabilities of the computer, and present that our complex logic in those capabilities only, right? Right. So now we have the concept called conditions, so the if else and switches. Now we are going to use another control structure called while loop, right? So to do this, so my requirement is print from 1 to the number you enter. Okay, so let's have I am going to introduce a variable now. Say int, I will say x or something. So I am going to start with 1 because anyway I am going to print from 1 to the number you enter, right? So those are common sense, right? So if I'm going to start print from 1 to your number, of course I have to initialize with 1, right? So that is common sense. So that you have to start thinking like this, then only you can come up with a solution, right? Right. So I'm going to use a loop now because I know that I have to keep printing 1 2 3 etc. It is going to be a repetitive task. I'm going to use a loop. Now again you can see that when I'm writing loop, I just write the control structure, right? I'm not just writing from top to bottom, right? So then I will think about this later, right? So what I'm going to do is so I'm going to print system out print. I will print vertically print ln. I'm going to print x, right? I'm going to print x, but if I just print x, it's going to print 1. But what I want to print is 1 to that number, the number that you entered, right? So what I'm going to do is and of course every time I'm going to increment it by 1, because then only next time it will be 2, next time 3, next time 4, because I know that this will be keep on happening. So therefore I'm going to increment it. So I can say something like x equal x plus 1, or we can just say increment by 1, right? Now I have to come up with the condition, right? So if I just say true here, it is going to happen forever, right? So keep on happening, because it will now x is 1, this is true, true means come into the loop, it will print x is 1, 1 will be incremented by 1, that means 2, it will come here, it says 2, come in, it will say print 2, now it is 3, it allows because it says 2, right? It will print 1 2 3 4 5 6 etc., right? So let's demonstrate that first, right? So I'm going to compile this and I'm going to run it. So I will say 5, but remember that is going to be a never ending loop, right? So it's going to keep on running, right? So I'm going to break it, control C will break it, right? Control Z or control C will break it, don't worry. I use control Z, or if control Z is not working, use control C. Control C will definitely going to break your stop your program, right? Right. So now issue is this is never ending loop, right? So we want our loop to uh, terminate after some time. So remember, do something, then finish it once you are okay, once the stuff is over. But now දැන් මේක මම කට කම්පියුටරේ කියන්නේ මෝඩ මැෂින් එකක් කියලා. දැන් මම කිව්වේ හරියට මම උදේට අපි කම්පියුටර් එකේ කියන රොබෝ කෙනෙක් කියලා මම උදේට කම්පියුටරේට කියලා යනවා උඩ පයින්න කියලා. හරි? දැන් මම වැඩට ගිහිල්ලා එනකොටත් මොකද කරන්නේ කම්පියුටරේ? කම්පියුටර් උඩ පැන පැන ඉන්නවා. හරි? ඔන්න ඒ වැඩක් තමයි මේ වෙන්නේ. ඇත්තම කම්පියුටරත් එක්ක වැඩ කරද්දී එහෙම තමයි. හරි? දැන් මට කියන්න ඕනේ මෙයාට ප්‍රිසයිස්ලි කියන්න ඕනේ ඔයා උඩ පයින්න. හැබැයි ඔයා 10ට උඩ පැනලා නවත්තන්න ඕනේ. Right? So now I am going to change this. I will say, so do this as long as your x is less than or equal to the number I have entered. So what is the number you have entered? I have taken it to a variable called, so let's forget about date, let's say max or something. So I don't need this string, so I will call this max. So max, the value is the one that I am taking from you. So as long as this x is less than max, I am asking to allowing it to come into the loop. Otherwise, with the moment this become false, because since I am keep on increasing x each time, after sometimes this x will be not less than or equal to max, it will be more than max, then it will get out of the loop. And I will just say by or something here. Print ln, let's say by, right? දැන් මම රොබෝට කියන්නේ යනකොට 10යි කියලා 10ක් උඩ පයින්න ගියාම රොබෝ 10 පාරක් උඩ පැන නවත්තන්න. හරි? right. So let's compile and run. So whole number I will say 10, and it print 1 to 10 because the condition will be not satisfied after 10, because 10 incremented by 1 is 11. 11 is not less than 10 because the number you entered is 10. Therefore, it will get out of the loop and it will say bye, right, and stop. Right? So that is how you do, right? So that is we use the control structure called repetition to solve the practical problem. So my problem is, I will say the maximum number, you have to do it, print from 1 to that number, right? So that is how you do it, right? Right, so that is how the while loop works. So it has a condition, Boolean condition. As long as the condition is true, it will allow you to enter into the system loop. Otherwise, it will throw out of the loop and continue with the rest of the sequence. Okay, right. So that is called. So I'm just explaining only one example, right? So I keep you to think about rest of the stuff, right? Right. So the next variation of the loop is called the do while loop. So do while loop is very rarely used. The only difference between while loop and do while loop is, in while loop you check the condition at the beginning. In do while loop you check the condition at the n, right? You can see set of statements, then you check the condition. So that is the difference between the while loop and do while loop. Usually most of the time you check the condition at the beginning, therefore do while is rarely used, but in case you need it, they have provided that facility. So I'm just going to change this to a do while loop now. Here you just have to say do, right? Do, and here you are going to have this while condition, right? While condition, and make sure that you have the semicolon when it comes to do while. Usually control structures don't have semicolons for the block, but this is a very special case where you have to have the semicolons in the at the end of the control structure. Okay, so now let's run it. Now we are not using a while, we are using a do while. Right, so again it's print 1 to 10. So how it happens, so I have entered 10 here, so it comes here, and by this time x is 1. Now it will do this print 1. Now x is incremented by 1. Now x is 2. 2 is less than 10, yes, it will go back to do print 2. Now 3. 3 is less than or equal to 10, yes, it keep happens. Then when it comes to 9, 9 will be printed. 9 incremented by 1. 10. 10 is less than or equal to 10, yes, 10 is less than or equal to 10 because equal, it will come here. And then 10 is printed. 11, no, 11 is not less than or equal to 10, get out of the loop. So only thing is you check the condition at the end, right? So now we have discussed two type of loops, the while loop and do while loop. So only place, or the difference between while and do while is, so I have given this. I updated this one also. I will be uploading the updated document maybe about 10 minutes time after the session to the Google Classroom. So the difference is check while check the condition at the beginning, do while check the condition at the end, right? So while loop may or may not execute the loop body, because if the condition is false in the very first instance on also, it will not execute the body at all. But in do while there is a guarantee that always your loop is executed at least once, because you are checking the condition at the end. So that is the nature of it. But most of the time this is less used, because most of the time we want to guard our condition at the beginning, not at the end, right? So therefore while is more natural. Do while is very rarely used. Actually whatever you do with do while, you can do with while also. Therefore modern languages uh, uh, like Python, they have removed this do while loop from the programming language, because they think that do while is a obsolete or additional thing, that if you can do whatever that you do with do while, why you want to keep it. But anyway, the languages, some old languages like C, C++, Java, C Sharp, because they have already added that feature. Even languages like Python, they are just keeping it, right? In the future anyway, they might even remove do while loop, right? Because while is more practical approach. Okay, now we are going to discuss the final loop, the for loop, right? So for loop is just a simple way of writing the while loop, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this back to the while loop, right? Back to while loop. So here you don't need semicolon then. So this is now while loop again, right? So I will again compile and run just to double check. Right. So I will say now 5. It will print 1 to 5, right? 1 to 5 and by, right? Now look at very closely how the for loop works, right? So for loop is just a simple short way of writing while loop, right? So the programmers or software engineers or the computer engineers or the people who design compilers found that when we are using a while loop, there is a pattern. We always have to use a variable to control our iterations, and that variable has to be changed. So it is not necessarily increment or whatever, you must change it, then only after sometimes this become false, right? So this will be keep on true, then after sometimes it has to be false, then only you are getting out of it, otherwise it will be never ending loop, right? So what they found is there must be a variable, it must have initial value, then in the body you have to change it, in the condition you have to check the condition, right? So now closely look at what I am doing. So they found that this has to be done, so that variable has to be initialized somewhere, so they took it, look at closely, they took it and put it there, right? Then they kept the condition in the same place, right? Then they took the, now you have to do the some changes to the variable, otherwise it is going to be a never ending loop. They took that and put it there, right? So now you don't need the semicolon, but you need the semicolon here to separate. Now you can see that initial part is here, condition is in the middle, right? Condition is the middle, what you did in the loop body is here, right? And now they change it to 4, right? Now they change it to 4, and you can see now it is much more compact, and they call it the for loop, right? So that's it, so that is how you learn for loop, right? So this is you learning, right? Not memorizing. So I can compile it, I can run it. So let's say 5, it will print 1 to 5, right? So remember, this line is what was there, this one is what was in the condition, this one is what was you supposed to do in the so it can be anything, right? It can be incrementing, decrementing, or you assign a value, right? So anything, right? Right, so that is called for loop, right? So it's very important that you understand the flow of control. So when you come to when the execution comes to the for loop, first it will execute this, because this used to be above, right? Above the for while loop, so this will be executed, then condition will be checked, right? If it is true, it will come to the body. Afterwards, once you reach the end of the loop, it will come to this post processing, the third step, because remember this used to be here, right? It will do that, then it will check the condition, uh, keep happening like this. Now you can see this happens only once, only in the very first time only. Why? This used to be here, right? So therefore it must happen only once, but these two must happen all the time, because this is the condition and this is something that was in the while loop, right? So look at this and think, then you will see that okay, for loop is nothing but the while loop in a different format. So if you want to write it less coding, you can use the for loop, right? But some programmers like the while loop, some programmers like the for loop. But if you are doing very simple things, for loop is good. But if you are doing a lot of complicated logic, programmers prefer to have the while loop. Okay, right? So that's it. So basically there are two type of for loops. So what I explain you is the general for loop, right? What I explain you is the general for loop, where you have this variable, condition, and post processing. If you want, you can declare multiple variables also with comma separated, right? You can check all these variables in the condition, and you can do multiple post processing also, right? So but you have to use comma, not semicolon. So actually I will give that kind of example also to this note before uploading to the Google class, right? So actually just now I thought that it is good thing to explain that kind of example also in the, so you can just type that example and experiment with that now. Okay, now we are going to discuss about the second type of for loop, or the second variation of the for loop, that is the array friendly for loop, or array friendly or collection friendly for loop. right. So I will explain it using example. So I will just comment this, because later also if I need it I can use it, right. So let's say I have an array. Remember we did arrays in the int, let's say x, let's say marks. I will use the short form, right, so that I can quickly create array. Curly brackets, I will say these are the marks, say 60, 50, 40, 90, right. Now if I want to iterate through this array, right, say I want to get the maximum marks, so I want to calculate the sum of the marks, etc., right. Anyway, I'll be adding that as an exercise for you to the Google Classroom. Because now we have done the control structures, now you can start solving some interesting problems, right, challenging problems, right, right. So that will increase your brain power. So say I want to print all the marks, then I will be using a first thing I can use a while loop, right. So first I will use a while loop. I will say int, let's say I equals 0, because I know that this is the 0, 1, first, second, third. Then I will use a while loop. While, remember when I write a code I always write the control structure. While I will say this I value is less than 0, 1, 2, 3, less than or equal to 3, because I want to move from next, right. So I will say then system dot out dot println, so array, this array, so therefore I have to use the marks, and I can use the variable here. So marks I means marks 1, marks 0, marks 1, marks 2, etc. But what I have to do is, otherwise this is going to be a never ending loop. I have to increment I by 1 each time, right. Then only first time 0, second time 1, next time marks 2, right. So when 2, after 2 it will be 3, then it will be marks 3, 0, 1, 2, 3, that is also okay. Then it will be 4. When it comes to 4, this is not satisfying, 4 is not less than or equal to 3, therefore it will go out of the loop and it will say bye, right. So now let's see. So that is how you are going to iterate through the array and print each and each one by one, right. So let's compile and run it, right. So marks I have hard coded 60, 50, 40, 90, and it says bye, right. So same thing I can now use by for loop, right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this cut, I'm going to take this, I will keep the semicolon here to separate, right. Now I know that it's going to do the same thing, right? And just this has to be 4, right? So same thing, right. So you know that for loop is related to uh, while loop, right. Then I'm going to do rather than this for loop, right. So this for loop is okay, but because we have to heavily work with arrays, right. Most of the time we are working with arrays when it comes to processing. So the Java people come up with a simpler for loop. So that is what we call array friendly or collection friendly for loop, right. So now I'm going to change this. Now look at this here, you can do it, but I'm going to use the simpler for loop now. So closely look at it. So I know that this is a array of int. This is array of int. Therefore, individual elements are going to be int. So therefore, what I am going to do is I will just keep it as int. Then I will introduce another variable. You can give any variable, right? let's call it something like X, or because this is marks I will just call it M, then the colon and your array, right? Then here you don't have to refer to the array, you can just refer to the individual element. So I will explain how it happens also, what is really happening. So this is your array, marks array, right? With 0, 1, 2, 3, you will have 60, 50, 40 and 90. So what happens is when the execution now when you execute this array will be there with the data. When you come here, we have another variable called m. Initially, so now this is your marks array, and this is your marks array, like marks, marks. There will be another variable called m. Initially, it will be referring to this, right? So now m is somewhere referring to this element. Now when you say print m, it will print 60. Now again come back to the for loop, it will automatically move to the next line then. Now m is here, right? Therefore when you print m, it will be 50. Next time it will be moved here, next time it will be here. When it comes to the end, it will naturally go out of the for loop. So all those things are done by the Java runtime, right? So always it start from the 0th element to the last element, like this way. Then when you reach the end, it will go out of the for loop. You don't have to do anything, right? So that is how the array friendly for loop works, right? So therefore this is going to do the same thing as the previous for loop. Now you can see this for loop is much more simpler. It will print 60, 50, 40, 90, right? So let's run it. So I'm going to compile it and run it. So it will print the same thing, but this is array friendly for loop. So when you work with arrays and collections, try to use this for loop. Other for loop also work, but if you are familiar with this for loop, again if this array is float or string or whatever, you have to just change the variable here and always use a different variable name here, right? Because this is going to refer to the individual elements at different iterations, okay, right? So I hope you get it, right? So I always assume that you get it anyway. As long as no questions, that means everything is understood, okay? Because you are humans, you are not a computer, you are not dumb machine, right? So dumb machines like computers, they don't ask question things, right? So they accept anything for granted and they just follow like slaves, right? So you are intelligent people, right? Intelligent people, the moment they have doubt, the moment they have something conflicting thing, they always say, okay, you half an hour ago you tell this, now you are telling this, those are conflicting, so why you are doing that? So oh, I don't understand, right? So likewise you have to ask. Intelligent people ask questions, dumb people they just, right? So of course intelligent people ask question only if they don't understand. So what we have is a bunch of very intelligent people, they understand every bit piece of it, therefore I have no issue at all, right? Right. So that is how the array friendly for loop works. So why we have two type of for loops? Of course, so anyway this is not maybe not in your current note, I will be uploading this note. So if you want to iterate entire array, because this array friendly for loop always iterate from first one to the last one, right? You don't have any control and always it is this way, right? But when it comes to normal for loop, you have the control to iterate from the final one to the first one or the second one to the fourth one. You have the better control, but only thing is the loop is little bit lengthy. But if you want to iterate all the things, right, that is the case in most of the cases, you can just use the array friendly for loop, right? Right. Right, now we are moving to the final control structure. So that though it's called a control structure, it's more a statement, right? So usually precaution is there. Don't use these control structures unless absolutely necessary, because these are not very good control structures, right? But if there are situations where you can't figure it out or you can't come up with a solution without these, yes, use it, right? And also return, don't use as a control structure, you use it only in method, right, to return something. So we are not going to discuss return as a control structure statement because we are going to use return only in methods, right? So methods, you can use the return statement to return something to the caller, right? Therefore we are going to use only break and continue. Return we will be discussing when we are discussing the methods, right? Right. So break will break out of the control structure. Usually it is a loop or condition or switch or whatever. Anyway, we saw the use of break in the switch control structure, right? So most of the time, other than switch, we will be using break to break out of the loops, right? Break out of the loops. Actually, anything break out of the loops. Most of the time, it is break out of the loops. Okay. So the break can be used in two ways: the simple break statement or break with label, right? So simple break, break with label. So there's a pattern, right? Continue also, simple continue, continue with label. Okay, so let's look at the simple break. Because we are running out of time, I'm going to just copy and paste this code. So we are having a simple for loop here. Inside that we have if statement also. I will explain everything. I'm just explaining the use of break statement. This is a very dumb sort of example. What is this? This is the end of for loop, right? So now try to understand this particular one. So forget about this for the time being. I will just cut it. Sorry, not cut it. Right. So what this do? It's a for loop, right? It's a for loop. It will print 1 to 10 because as sorry 1 to 9. So as long as x is less than 10, you have to print x is x, right? So the moment x become 10, next time it will be 11. 11 is not less than 10. It will break out of the for loop. So it will print 1 to 10 and 5. Now let's see. It prints sorry 1 to 9 by 1 to 9. So it will print 9. Okay, so this is saying less, not less than or equal 10. It says less than 10. So I will make it just less than equal 10. And then it will print 1 to 10. 1 to 10. Right. Now what I am going to do is I am going to break this for loop for a certain situation. Right. I am going to introduce this. For example, when I say if x is 5, I will say break. So what is the use of break? Break out of the current control structure or the current outer loop, right? Basically current outer loop. So current loop is this one, right? Current outer loop is this one. Therefore, it will break out of the, like actually there's only one loop here. It will break out of the loop, right? So now when x is 1, it will print x. It won't come here because x is not equal to 5. Then again x is 2, 3, 4. Now 4 is printed. Now again it will be 5, right? After here it will come here, incremented 5. 5 is less than or equal to 10 years. It will print 5. Now this condition is satisfied, right? Because x is 5. Now it says break. It will break out. So that means it will not continue the rest of the for loop. Otherwise it will continue like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it says break when it comes to 5. Therefore it will break out of this for loop. That means it will come here and it will print bar, right? So let's see. It's a very crazy example, right? Just to demonstrate, right? So it just print 1 to 5. Okay. Okay, someone will say, okay, why don't you keep it just 5 here? Yes, that is why I told this is a very crazy example. Okay, now I am going to make that crazy example a little bit interesting example. right? So now I am asking the user to enter a positive number. Enter a positive number, right? I am asking them to enter a positive number, whole number between 1 to 10. So I'm just asking the user, please give me a number 1 to 10. 1 to 10. 1 to 10. So that there should be double quotes. Yes, right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it as the max, right? I am going to print from 1 to 10. In general, I will print 1 to 10. But if your number is something like 6, I will stop at 6. Right? If your number is 4, I will stop at 4. Right? So what I can do is I will check that number here. Right? Max. If it is that max, I will say break it. I will say break it. So that I am going to make it a little bit interesting, but again this is a dumb sort of a solution. I will explain why also. I will explain why also. So anyway, so let's compile and see. Now I'm going to run it. Say I will say 6. It print 1 to 6 and break, because it break out of the loop. In general, it is supposed to go from 1 to 10, but the moment it comes to the break statement, it get out of the loop. Actually, we don't have to use a break here. What I could have done is I could have just make it x less than or equal to max. Okay, so again, this is not a very practical example, but this is a little bit interesting example. Okay, right. So that is how the break without label works. Now I will explain the continue without label. So with label I will take last. So the what continue does is it's something like this. So I will just explain you. So say I am keep on running in a track. I keep on running in a track. So always there is a condition here. So break is you always check the condition, keep running. So this is your starting point. Here you check the condition. If it is false, you keep running. The moment the condition is true, you stop this whole running process. Right? So that is why break out of the loop. Right? So that is how the break occur. Continue means something like this. So while you are running in the conditional statement, like if you are going to check the condition. If the condition is false, you keep running. If the condition is false, you keep running. If the condition is true, in break what happens? You stop the entire process. In continue, right? So you have been running up to this now in this particular round. You check and now the condition is true and now it says continue. When it says continue, what you have to do is you don't do the rest of the current iteration. You don't do the rest of the current iteration. What you have to do is go back to the if it is true, go back to the start of the condition or start of your iterations. Start of the iteration means you are not start from the beginning. You again going to the check the condition, and if the condition is true still, you can again keep on doing, but you are not going to do the rest of the current iteration. You are not going to do the rest of the current iteration. So that is what happens when it comes to continue. When it's break, your entire thing is stopped. When it say continue, the rest of the current iteration is skip. You join the next iteration. You join the next iteration. So that is how you understand that. Okay, right. So let's do an example. So what I'm going to do is I'm just changing this to continue. Continue. Right. Now to make it practical, I'm going to put that line below. Otherwise, you won't see what is happening. Right. Right. Now what happens? Now it is actually not max. I will say skip to make it more sense. Skip. Right. Now what will happen is when you come to that number, I am going to continue means it is not going to do the rest of this line. It is going to join the this particular place again, right? Now what, for example, if the user enter 5 here, if the user enter 5, it will keep printing 1 2 2, 3, 4. Now after 4 it is 5. 5 is less than 10. Now 5 is 5. Now it comes to the continue statement. A continue statement asks you to do not do the rest of the current iteration. So therefore this won't execute it. It will go there. Now 5 is not printed because it is a continue. Now it will be incremented 6. This is not 6. Therefore now 6 will be printed. 7 will be printed. Now you can see it will print 1 to 10, but not the whatever the value you entered. Right. So that is why I just changed the name into skip. Right. Right. Let's compile and run it. Java C test. Now I will run it. I will say 4. Now it will print 1, 2, 3, not 4, right? Not 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right? So that is a little bit more interesting example thing, right? So that you can use using continue, right? So break is you get out of the process of the loop. Skip continue means you skip the rest of the current iterations, right? You use those terms, right? But you are not breaking the thing, right? So only the rest of the current iteration who again go to the loop and do the rest of the stuff. Okay, right? For example, if I could have written something like if x equal 1, 2 or 4, then 1, 2 and 4 will not be printed, right? Right, now we are moving to the break with label and continue with label, right? So simple break statement we have done, right? So think about those things. Now we are going to discuss the break with label. So how the break with label occurs, this normal break statement will always break out of the nearest outer loop. But if you have multiple outer loops, that means multiple outer loops, and if you want to break out of a not the nearest loop, something beyond that or another next level outer loop or next level outer loop, you have to use this break with uh, label, right? So to demonstrate that, I will use an example. So now I don't need this. So I don't need the main method. Control C. So then we have another for loop. Then we have if that happens break, end of the if condition, then you have to do something else. So always I am indenting it. So there is another for loop. I have to indent one more. This is the end of this for loop, and this is just in the main method, and end of the main method you can see under P. This is the end of the class, right? So properly indented. Now let's see what happens, right? So now assume that I am not using this label. I am just saying break. Now what happens? Now this for loop comes from 1 to 5. This for each for loop here, I am having another for loop here. It goes for when x is 1, it goes from 1 to 4 again, right? When x is 2, again it goes from 1 to 4. But when it comes to y equal 3, we say ask it to break. But what will happen is it will break from this loop. Therefore, it won't go from 1 to 5. It will go from 1 to always it will go from 1 to 1, 2, 3 only. And since this print statement is below, actually it won't print the third one also, right? So it will be something like 1, 1, 1, 2, even 1, 3 won't be printed. Then 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 4, 2, 5, 1, 5, 2, right? So you must be able to understand these things now. Now let's compile and run Java C. So you can see 1 1 1 2 2 1 2 2 3 1. So it's up to you. Right? මේ කල්පනා කරන ඔලුවට ආවේ නැත්නම් හරි කල්පනා කරන්න බැරි නම් ඉතින් IT කරන්න එපා. හරි කල්පනා කරන්න බැරි අයට තියෙනවා වෙන jobs තියෙනවා. Right. So what happens when it comes to the break statement? It will break out of the nearest outer loop. Nearest outer loop. Right. So assume that I want to break out of the not the nearest outer loop. Now it will be done by the normal break, but I want to break out of another level of a loop. So this should be somewhere here, right? So say I want to break out of this for loop. Then what I have to do is have a label somewhere here, because this one we don't have label. Normal break will always get out of this for loop. Now I have to have some label. You can give any name as long as it is not a keyword, so whatever, right? So I will say just OU and colon, then I have to say break OU, right? OU. Now when y equal 3, it will not break out of this for loop. It will break out of this label, the loop having OU label. In my case it is this particular loop. Now what is the output? Now you think about and tell me what is the output. Now it will be 1 1, then 1 2, right? Then 3 won't be executed, right? So then it says the moment it becomes 3, it says break out of the loop. So therefore that's the end of it, because this loop is now also terminated. It will just print 1 1 1 2 and y, right? 1 1 1 2 and because now it is breaking out of this bigger loop also, outer loop also. That's the end of the story. 1 1 1 2 and that's the end of the story. It will say bye, right? So let's do it. Right, you can say 1 1 1 2 and y, because it's breaking out of the label loop, which is the outer loop. So if it is just the inner loop, you don't have to have a label. If you want, you can have it, but it's optional. But if you want to break out of a outer loop, so that is also outer loop, nearest outer loop. But if you want to break out of a outer loop which is not the nearest one, you have to have a label and specify the label, right? You can specify any label here, right? Right. So I hope you got it. The same thing you can do for continue also. If you want to continue nearest outer loop, you can just have the continue. But if you want to continue outer loop, you have to have the label, right? Continue. Now you should be able to guess what is the output is, right? What is the output is and how, why it is happening. Now what happened is, when it is 3, it asks you to continue the outer loop, right? So it's a very good exercise for you to think about what is the output is, right? What is the output is. So I just keep it as exercise. So think about what is the output is. So the code is in your I will publish this to the WhatsApp group, right? So for you to keep it as exercise, right? I will put it into the WhatsApp group code. So think about it and what is the output, and then run it and see what is the output is, right? So I hope you don't have any questions. So we will wind up the session, keeping that as a exercise for you, right? So thank you.